Hello, everyone. I think we're live, so I'm happy to tell welcome to the beautiful webinar about the Pinterest. I'm your host, Magdalena Urbaniak, today, and I'm happy to introduce you our guest. So let me to say a couple of words about the ladies who will be talking today. Justine Gap is the visual designer at Tailwind, a Pinterest and Instagram scheduler and analytics platform. When not designing, you can find her rock climbing both indoor and outdoor, practicing yoga, most recently hot yoga, or sipping a hot cup of coffee like me. Fun fact, she's also in the process of closing on her first home. Congratulations, just
Thank
on that.
you.
Uh, and welcome, Alisa. Alisa Meredith is a sought-after speaker and teacher on Pinterest marketing and the Pinterest product specialist at Tailwind. As you've heard before, a Pinterest and Instagram scheduler and analytics platform. When not pinning, you can find her on the beach in North Carolina doing acrylic pours or spoiling her blind dog and more cats that she's claimed. Reach out on Twitter, LinkedIn, and make her day by asking about Pinterest. Hello.
Hello, Magdalena. Thanks for having
Hello.
us.
Yes, thank you.
It's so nice to have you on this webinar. So I think it's all I could say at the beginning. People are waiting. Okay, it's so nice to see so many people from different part of the world. Hello,
Mm.
everyone. Yeah, we have guests from US, and it's awesome. So
Italy.
in Montreal, nice to see that. So let's go directly to the first presentation. Alisa, microphone is yours.
Okay, thank you, Magdalena. So last time I was on the webinar with search, which was great fun and wonderful. But this time I thought we would go a little bit more tactical, practical, in the weeds. Let's get it done. So if you haven't seen that webinar, I highly recommend it. I dug into the Pinterest Medium blog extensively to understand what are all the elements that go into search. How can you get your content discovered? So we'll cover a little bit of that today, but I really wanted to walk you through, like, what is this beast of Pinterest? How do we make it work for us? So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to walk through. All right, I can see it's showing. All right, so here is my Pinterest feed. And one of the first things to understand about marketing on Pinterest is how it works, right? So the best way to do that is to use it as a consumer. And trust me, there's no shortage of stuff you can get into on Pinterest. so as we mentioned in my bio, I just recently started doing some acrylic pours. Have an interest in dogs. I bought a new house a year ago. It's like my life is reflected in this home feed, and that's what you're going to find about yourself as well. Oh, yeah, here's an article I wrote. So it's really funny to see the dynamic nature of the Pinterest home feed, and what I see is completely different than what Magdalena sees or what Justine or what you're going to see. And here's why. So I don't know if you tried this, but if you hover over a pin, we have those three little dots. If you click on that for more information, it says this pin was inspired by your recent activity. Well, that's not a surprise. I've been looking at a lot of ways to do acrylic pours. So let's see what else we have here. Here's, this one was promoted. So Squarespace paid to have it shown up where I would see it. Okay, that makes sense. I can see a bunch of other ones. Oh, why in the world am I seeing that? Let's see. 100 ideas for my next Fear Factor food challenge. Trust me, I have not been searching for that, but Pinterest thought maybe I had been. So, it's not perfect. They want me to discover new things, but guess what? I'm not clicking on that pin. So sometimes I'm seeing less and less of pins from people I follow, but every once in a while you'll get one of those. Recent activity. What is this Fear Factor thing it thinks I'm into?
Maybe it's all your acrylic pours.
That's the Fear Factor?
I don't know. It's like a gateway.
Either.
It's a gateway into
Fear Factor. Yeah. So I don't know. This might be recent activity. Yeah. So I was able to find one a minute ago that was inspired by a board that I follow or someone that I follow. But mostly what I'm seeing now is based on my recent activity. Yeah. So that's why people are seeing what they're seeing in home feed. It's important to note too that a lot of the activity happens in search. So let's look at search. And Magdalena, can you give me something that you might search for on Pinterest?
Okay, maybe we can looking for something I'm very interested in, which is tractor.
Tractor?
Yeah, I have a blog about tractor machines.
Do you really?
Oh,
I
didn't
do.
know that. That's interesting. Okay.
Wow, that is fascinating. Okay.
Nobody said I'm normal.
I wasn't. I just wanted to know something. Now, you know what's going to happen because I searched for tractor repair? You know what's going to happen to my home feed?
I can see your feed.
Well, this is a search result. But next time I log in on my home feed, there's going to be all this tractor stuff. Now, I can go into my settings and turn that off so I won't see tractor stuff. But it's just interesting. Pinterest has now gotten the signal that I'm into tractors. So it really wants to help me indulge in that little obsession of mine. So just looking at tractor repair, and I think this is a little bit of a tough one on Pinterest because it is so female dominated that there's not a ton of content. So they're they're kind of resorting to, oh, that's adorable. So this is a service tractor for kids to teach kids how to work on them. Love that. So
if I may, I'm sorry I interrupt you. If I may say something, I think that Pinterest is showing you tractor stuff, but also somehow related to something you already you was looking in the past, not only tractor related. That's why I think I'm not an expert here, but I think it might influence because when I'm looking for tractors picture, it's very heavy machine orientated.
Interesting.
So you're seeing a different search result. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's great to know because that's the difference between, well, I mean, Google does that to some extent, gives you a personalized search result, but Pinterest is much more so. So just understanding how Pinterest search works. And again, please go watch that webinar if you really want to know all the details. But the things that they look at are, for example, the image itself. So Pinterest AI can read what's in your image. So it may look at this image and assign keywords to it. Like it may assign something like toy or tractor or machinery. So it assigns keywords based on what it sees the image to be. It also will read text on your image. So I'm trying to find one with text on image. So we'll read that. But I think there's probably not a ton of content on tractors and tractor repair on Pinterest, but it is looking also at your title. It's looking at your description, and it's also looking at your board. So this is not a fantastic example, but in general, when you are saving a pin, and we'll get into that in a minute, you want to make sure that everything is consistent. So I'm going to click through and even go to the source page, and there we have the keyword there, right? So Pinterest is looking for consistency from pin to board description to the content on your page. And that plus all those personal factors is how you get ranked in search. So just good to keep in mind when you're pinning. So a lot of times when people are first setting up, they ask, well, what's the best way to set up my profile? So username, I go with my own name. If you have a business name, you can do that. You get one link here, and this website has been claimed. So what that means is I am telling Pinterest that this is my site. When content comes out from my site and I pin it, I want you to know that comes from me. And that also gives you access to more analytics than you would have otherwise. And gives you like a little more credit because you are the content creator. Pinterest loves content, wants great content, so they like it when you publish things. I have used a photo of my face. That works well for most businesses. So for Tailwind, we use our logo because there's no one face of Tailwind. But for many people, they're going to find they want to use their face. Now, when we look at the boards setup, so people will ask you, like, how many boards should I have? What boards should I create? It really has to do with the content that you yourself are publishing. So if you think about the maybe 10 to 15 topics you write about, you need to have boards that will support all of those. And you might have more than one. So I have a Pinterest marketing for business. I have Pinterest promoted pins, Pinterest search tips. I've broken those all down into like a more of a niche kind of title, which then I save my pins to. Right. So when you're saving your pin, the first time it goes out, you want it to go to the most relevant board. So if I'm writing about how to track signups and sales from Pinterest ads, it's first going to go onto my promoted pins board, but then it also belongs on Pinterest marketing for business or Pinterest search tips and anything else having to do with Pinterest, even in maybe a broad like digital advertising board. But basically, your boards should support your content. Now, if you're using Pinterest as yourself and as your business, it may be that you also want to look at acrylic pours or tractor repair or yoga routines. So what you can do is have your secret boards, and that's what I do. Have a lot of them.
Acrylic pours, right there.
The very first one, right? So yeah, even for like my friends' hairdos. So I'm gonna have to cough. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, so the reason for that is because Pinterest is looking at the activity that your followers in particular take when you publish a pin. And that signal tells Pinterest, oh, this is a good piece of content because her followers are engaging with it. Or, ooh, it's not. I'm not going to give it that much distribution. So the thing, like if I started publishing all these acrylic pour pins publicly, people might start following me looking for acrylic pour information. And then when I come out with this blog post that I poured my heart and soul into, they're like, I don't care about that. And if they don't engage with it, Pinterest says, this is no good. I'm not going to distribute it. So that's why I keep these private. Okay. So another thing to think about is your blog content, the way that you present it on Pinterest is going to be way different from the way you present it on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, especially. So a quote I heard recently that I really, really love is that Pinterest is for yourself, not for your selfie. So if you look at, is it so true? It's like, and Instagram is completely the opposite, which is fine. Mm-hmm. Everything has its place, but you have to reframe your content depending on which platform you're on. So this here, I mean, goodness, could you be any more all about me? No, you could not. Right. So, yeah, I'm keeping that private, and the rest is going to be all about you, right? It's all about yourself and what you need and how I can help you. So that's the difference. So I've talked to people who are like, I've tried Pinterest and it didn't work. And I'll say, well, what did you try? And they'll say, well, I shared our company party. I shared my portfolio. And it's like, that can work on Instagram. That's great. That's what people want to know about you on Instagram. On Pinterest, they want to know about themselves and their family and how they can make their own lives better. So just take that same content and reframe it. So Justine, can you give me an article you've read recently? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. This is too much pressure. I guess you could do something on maybe hot yoga.
We could do hot yoga.
Sounds like something I may have read.
It does sound like something I'm sure you've read recently. So if it's on your blog and you're going to put it on Instagram, maybe it's how I went from level 0 to level, are there levels in yoga? There probably are.
Depends on what kind of yoga you're practicing. But maybe thinking about like inversions, like handstands. That's a good one, right?
How I learned to do a handstand in yoga.
Yeah.
Okay. So that could work great on Instagram, and maybe you would include a video of how you did it, and then you'd become a famous influencer and you'd never talk to me again. It's a very sad story, but that could work. Now, if you were going to use that same content on Pinterest, and you should, because people are searching for yoga and how to do handstand and all that stuff, instead, you're going to say how to do a handstand, right? Or even better, because like kids don't need to know how to do handstands. You could do adults how to do handstand. Like think about these people on Pinterest. You on Pinterest are looking for something you can learn, something you can do. On Instagram, it's more like, what is that person doing? How can I, be cool like them? And Pinterest is like, how can I actually make it happen?
More aspirational.
Aspirational, inspirational, informational, super different. But again, it's that same piece of content. You're just framing it two different ways, right? So it's kind of similar with your search, with your SEO and your keyword choices. So on Google in particular, people have an intent to buy a lot of times. A lot of times they do a lot of branded searches, which you probably noticed. If you have a branded website, you get a lot of branded search, which is great. But on Pinterest, it kind of evens the playing field because 97% of searches are not branded. So if you're searching for yoga pants, you're probably looking for yoga outfits as opposed to like Lululemon yoga, right? So if you're a business owner who hasn't spent years and millions of dollars building brand awareness, Pinterest is actually a really great place to start because you can reach people when they're just getting inspired. So that's one of the things I love about Pinterest. So again, when you're choosing the images you're going to create for Pinterest, use those headlines that you know are going to work better on Pinterest. Stay away from fear and talking about problems and focus on solutions and inspiration. You can also, I'm going to let Justine talk about how to create great images because she has a ton of good information for you. But something you can do, which we do on our site, and these are images that Justine made, when you hit the pin button, it pulls up 3 different pinnable images for this one post, which is a great idea. We use a plugin to hide these images. And then it pulls up with the description and everything. So when you're creating a pin, and maybe you've done this before, maybe you haven't, but you're going to want to create a title. And here's your description. So this is a good description. It should be, here's what's in this post. Here's why you should read it. Here's why it's going to make your life better. And so that this one does that. It also has 1 to 2 hashtags, which can help in search and discovery as well. So let's say this is the first time I'm saving this image. I'm going to save it to the most relevant board. Look at all those secret boards in there. So I'm going to say, yeah, Instagram Lab. I'm going to save it there. So if I look at it, I want to look at some of the elements of it. It's not picked up. And it's not letting me add a title. So if you, yeah, it will eventually pull it from the website because we have rich pins enabled. But when you upload a pin, so let's do it from here. Let's create a pin because this is a little funky right now. You would add your title. First, I'm going to upload an image. I didn't grab those, so I'll do this one. Okay, so your title should really be your headline, and you don't want to repeat the text that's in your image because you want to give some additional context with your title. So I'll say grow traffic from Pinterest. You could even do like easy ways to grow traffic. Okay, right, so that if someone's looking through the feed, they're going to see that right underneath the pin. And then you're going to give your description to give people more detail, try to entice them to click, and then add your destination link and your board. Okay, so then when you do that, obviously you're going to see it in the feed. Yeah, so here again, title, description, URL, image, and board. Yeah. So those are kind of the elements of a pin that go together. So in case you haven't done a lot of that yet. And then remember, of course, the board you save it to, it should have a description. This one does not. And a lot of them don't, but it is a search factor. So do use board descriptions wherever possible. So people will ask sometimes, well, what should I pin? If you're talking about your own content, and that really is where your focus should be, is on your own content rather than curating other people's content, create special pinnable images. So Justine creates pinnable images for everything that we post because we want that traffic. We get a lot of traffic from Pinterest, and it's no accident. So that, the more time you're willing to put into it, the better results you're going to get. I want to save that one too while we're at it. Okay, so that's what you pin. You pin a vertical image. Justine will talk more about what goes into making a great image. You can absolutely share other people's content as well if it's something that you want to read later, if you think your audience will find it interesting. That's like, Pinterest is a place to save things. It's a very natural behavior. But when you're talking about growing your own business, it's your content that you need to focus on. So people have promoted the 80-20 rule forever, saying you should only pin 20% of your own content, 80% of someone else's content, which is kind of ridiculous because all that work going into promoting someone else's content makes no sense. And there is no reason, like Pinterest does not look at your account and say, oh, they're being self-serving. People do not look at your account and say, oh, what a selfish pinner. They're only sharing their own content. That's just, it's not a thing. If you like someone, you want to support them, share their content. If you think it's great, you think your audience will love it, share their content, but don't do it for any other reason. So again, what to pin: great, gorgeous images that fit your niche. And you can go a little outside of that. So if you're a lifestyle blogger and you pin mostly about recipes, it's perfectly fine to pin about like your home remodel, because those things go together. Like the people who are interested in recipes are probably also interested in home remodeling. So you can kind of go outside a little bit.
Okay, we're thinking that it's a short pause. We hope so.
Oh.
So just let's wait a couple of seconds, hoping that Alyssa will come back to us. Yeah, sometimes the internet is doing some kind of things.
Looks like
okay. So
okay.
I think that we will wait for Alyssa to come back to us, because there's so many questions for her after her presentation.
I see some questions in here. I think I can help answer some of them while we're waiting. So one of them is, does a private board mean potential followers can't see it? And the answer to that is yes. So when you create a secret board, that is only for you, and whoever you invite to that board can view that board, but your followers won't be able to see what you're pinning there, which kind of goes back to what Elisa was saying about how she uses secret boards to pin things that she's interested in, but she doesn't think her audience would be interested in. So it'll allow you to still use Pinterest as a consumer and not have to like create another account in order to save certain pins. So hopefully that answers that question. There are a few here.
Yeah, we have more. So the question is if you prefer to reply to some of the question, or you prefer to go with the presentation and respond to the question after. Because we can do both. If you feel we can go with your presentation right now, and hopefully we'll have Alyssa back at the end and we can answer to all the questions all together.
Sure. Yeah, I can go ahead and go with my part of things. Just bear with me for a quick second here. I'm just going to rearrange things.
I can say something meanwhile.
Sure. Okay. I think I'm ready to go.
Okay. So it was a motivation. Okay. Let's go.
Okay. Awesome. So basically my portion of this whole webinar is going to be talking about design. It's kind of what I do here. So I've been designing pins for quite a while and sort of using Elisa to bounce off ideas of what's working on Pinterest. So like what colors work on Pinterest? How do we use text? What images should I use? So what I really want to walk through is we had a Facebook Live with Tailwind, I think about a month ago, where I took some pins that were submitted from Tailwind members and redesign them just to show some really quick things, design tips that you can use, anyone can use if you're a designer or non-designer, to sort of either bring life back into old pins or to design pins if you aren't a designer or don't have a lot of time to spend designing. So I really want this to be about actionable tips that you can take with you. Oh, here's Elisa. I
Welcome
started
back.
just going into my design portion of it, but
I don't know how long
we
I was
could
off.
about 5 minutes or so.
No way.
Maybe not 5, a couple minutes.
Oh,
No,
so
three and a half tops.
Okay.
Oh my God.
So that's
yeah,
just a
I'm
teaser
just-
now. We'll go back to you, Elisa. So if you're
Yeah,
listening and you're on, that's a
let's
little
do this
teaser
way.
for what's later.
Okay. Preview. Yes, stick around. It just got really quiet, and I thought, uh-oh. I looked, and the little red light was off. I'm so sorry. Okay,
worries.
so do you remember where I was, or shall I just guess?
I think that because we already started with Justine's presentation,
Yeah.
so maybe let's go with this presentation right now, and we'll be back to the questions that already popped up. Can we do this way?
Yes, there's just one thing I really want to make sure everybody hears about, because they may have seen it on Facebook, which is the Facebook Live that we had with Lucy Matthews of Pinterest. There was a big announcement about the algorithm of Pinterest changing. So it used to be that it was more about the relevancy of your content, relevant to search, relevant to people, relevant to Pinterest, the trends. That was weighted very, very heavily. And now because they noticed that people were really engaging with new, fresh content on Pinterest, they're starting to weight that higher. So you're going to still see a mix of that older content, but you're going to see a lot of fresh content a lot sooner. So the recommendation is that rather than duplicating your content over and over again, because you're going to see diminishing returns on that you really focus on creating more fresh pins, which a fresh pin just means a new image. So you can have an older blog post as long as it's still relevant and up to date. Just create a new image for it, and you can get a whole lot more distribution on Pinterest. So you can still reshare, like share to every relevant board, within reason. They do need to be actually relevant. You can share seasonally. So if you have a pin that does well every fall, share it again every fall. But just to move away from that constant curation and do more creation, and you're going to have more success. So that was a big announcement last week.
Okay. Thank you for adding this. It's really important. Okay, so Justine, can we go back to the
Sure.
presentation you just started? Okay, let's go ahead and we'll be back with the question. Thank you.
Okay, so we can just dive right in. What I'm going to be sharing with, or I guess Elisa will be sharing on her screen, is I've taken 3 pins that were submitted from members. One of them is a DIY home improvement type pin. The second one is an e-commerce pin specifically focused on jewelry. And the third one is a travel pin. So if you're in those niches, like this is going to be super valuable. If you're not, it's also going to be great because we can use a lot of these tips that I will be sharing for many industries, many niches. Okay, so this is the first pin. And whenever I'm redesigning or looking at a pin, I like to kind of take a step back and see what jumps out at me first. So the question I always ask is, so what do I see first? With this one, it's a little difficult, right? Like there's a lot going on. So I see some text. I see cabinets in the background. We're very visual. So typically when people look at an image or a visual, like the first thing they're going to see is probably the image over text. But mainly what I'm seeing here is like, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, right? There's a lot to look at. There's a lot of text to read and it's hard to read. When you're creating a pin, one of the top rules is that if you're adding text to an image, people have to be able to read it. Not just us, but Pinterest has to read it as well. And Elisa knows this too, because she's read some articles or, some Pinterest behind the scenes sort of looks about how Pinterest will actually look at your pin and read the text on your image. And I don't know if you want to like talk a little bit about that, Elisa.
Sure. So that's one of those search elements. It gives us an extra signal to Pinterest about what your image is about. So it is important that they can read it. And the article that Justine was referencing is on the Pinterest engineering blog on Medium. And they actually showed how Pinterest reads text on image. So they had this example of it was a bookshop pin, and they showed the words in the pin image that they could read. And one of them was actually in the background. They could read a sign, the text on that. But then they had used on the pin itself, the text on the pin, they had used a really curvy fonts. And Pinterest was only able to read part of the word. So what they were reading was ook shops instead of bookshops. And it was just a really vivid picture of, okay, Pinterest cannot read that text. And probably I couldn't either if it was on my phone.
Yeah, so I think general rule to follow there is like if you can't read the pin, it's going to be really difficult or hard for you to expect others to be able to read the pin.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really coming through for me on this particular pin. So we can go over now to the redesign pin. And I'm going to talk through a few elements here that I pulled out. So number one, this is also a rule that I like to follow. It helps reduce uncertainty and is just like a good design rule in general. Never use more than 2 different typefaces. And what I mean by typefaces, so if you're familiar with like Open Sans or Arial, those are all typefaces. Never use more than 2. And I would say if you can just use one, and I have another pin later on, I'll show you that there can be a lot of versatility with just one typeface as well. Just go ahead and stick with one. It's going to make creating pins just a lot easier. You don't have to think about finding fonts that work well together. And on that note too, it's really, really difficult to choose font pairings that work together very well. So just like there are a ton of great resources online already of people who do this professionally, like their job is typography. Just go ahead and search for font pairings. There's a lot of different resources online. I use it all the time. There's one in particular called fontjoy.com. It's a great resource. Aside from that, I mean, if you just Google it, right, you're going to get a lot of different expert opinions on fonts that pair well together. So that's kind of one point I want to hit on. And then the next point I want to talk about is branding. So you notice maybe on the first pin, there wasn't any branding. That's Pinterest is recommending, and we recommend add a little bit of subtle branding. Here we've just got a logo in the bottom right corner, which is maybe it's hard to see on the screen. It's like being a little bit cut off, but that's okay. There's just a small, there we go. There's a small logo right on the bottom. You don't need to have your brand front and center. If you look at even companies that have a strong brand recognition, like maybe Target or Kohl's or Nordstrom, some of those that are really heavily present on Pinterest, even they don't do like heavy branding. So the branding is like not as important here, and especially on pins. What we really want is reading the text and connecting that with your image. And this image was actually pulled from that same blog post. So there were a couple images in there. I liked this one better because it's a little bit cleaner. It's brighter. There's a lot of like nice natural light. Where the other one is kind of like a little bit dark. So with the image on the right, I actually did kind of bump up the contrast and brightness and a little bit of saturation. And I find you can do that with a lot of images because we want that kind of bright, white, clean, like this is aspirational, right? Like, wow, I look at the second kitchen and it's the same kitchen, but the second one is just, it feels like a place that I want to cook in.
Feels really modern too.
Yeah, it feels really modern. So that's sort of that redesign there. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them live. The other thing that I really played with on the second one is leave room for the font to breathe. White space is just kind of space around the text. So we've got a lot of room for it to breathe. We don't feel as overwhelmed because we can actually, one, read it, and two, it's not competing against anything. It's not competing against the image. It's playing with the image.
You know what? This makes me want to do it. right? That's what a
Yes.
great pin does. Like,
Yeah, I want to click on that pin
yeah.
and learn how to paint my cabinets like that
Without sanding, and they can look
without
that
sanding.
good.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah,
Yes.
I'm sold.
And that's actually, so when I was designing this pin, I was looking for some inspiration with people who have maybe created pins like this or done something like this. And I typed into Pinterest, paint kitchen cabinets, and Pinterest below had recommended some additions to add. I don't know what exactly to call those, but recommended like further searching for
That's
things
guided
and
search. Yeah.
guided search. And the top
Mhm.
one was without sanding. And I thought, great, this is perfect. So I will include that in the pin because clearly people want to or are searching for that.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. So we can move on to the next one.
Okay.
All right. So this is the e-commerce jewelry pin. So first thing when I see this pin is we've got some really beautiful earrings, right? But this pin isn't really doing a great job, in my opinion, of calling that out. Additionally, like we've got a lot of text on top. It's kind of a light pink background. It's a little bit hard to read. Again, here's another sort of typography rule: is all caps can be difficult to read. So I would, if you're going to use all caps, use it for kind of short sentences or things where you want people to slow down to read. I think this one with this particular font and the color with the background makes it really hard to read. There's not a whole lot of contrast happening there.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to point out is the website. So we've got this https://
Does look good.
Take it out. Take it out. We don't need it. People know it's a website. Like it's just adding more for us to read. And frankly, like we skip the HTTPS. Like I'm even struggling saying it, right? So like we're not reading that. So just like completely remove it and honestly just make even the branding a little bit more subtle. So okay, we can go to the next pin now, the redesign one. Okay, so here, what I did, again, I took an image from the product page. It was an image that was already on there. Added in the logo because there was a logo from this website. And I liked the logo better than the website. It felt, yeah, there was a logo. So I was like, yeah, let's use the logo.
Yeah.
It's great. And then just kind of like remove some of that. I think it had with mixed metals on the bottom. I don't know if we necessarily need it here, especially because it's so clean to just say like, okay, these are earrings and like, here's the actual product so you can see it. And then I added a little shop now button on the bottom, CTA or call to action. So we're asking the audience to take an action on this. Like you can actually buy these earrings, right? So it's not just like, cool, you showed me a picture of earrings. Am I supposed to make those?
Right.
Is this DIY? Like, what do you want me to do with this? So now people have a reason to click on the pin because they're going to purchase, right? They want to buy these earrings. So I think that's like really important, especially for e-commerce and it doesn't have to be a button like this, but a call to action of some sort of like shop now, so people know what they're getting themselves into when they click on the pin, or just so that they actually click on the pin. We want them to take action. The other kind of fun design tip that I like to bring up, especially talking about buttons, but even designing in general. So there's a well-researched psychological effect called the Bubba-Kiki effect. And it basically shows that the human brain attaches abstract meaning to visual shapes and speech sounds in a consistent way. So like when you hear Kiki, you might think of kind of jabbing or like, it's like, I don't know, like a starburst maybe, right? Sharp. And then booba, maybe you're thinking like rounded edges and sort of like a blob almost. So we can use this psychological effect when designing. And specifically here with sort of this button at the bottom. And how we can use it is when creating elements or like even fonts too. The rectangular shape, the sharp edges is more luxurious and professionals. You'll see a lot of like banks using sharp edges or high-end maybe vehicles using sharp edges. And then for rounded edges or pill buttons, just like a full circle, is more playful, a little bit more friendly. So you might, I don't have like a great example for that one, but you will notice them more now that you're aware of this effect. I certainly have since learning about that. But I thought here these were great for these earrings. Like, this is luxury, right? We want to make this feel like this is a bit more luxurious. A rounded button is just not going to do that or have the same effect. Yeah, and then I just pulled in some of the colors from the jewelry because that purple is so rich and beautiful. I think it would be a shame to just have it on the jewelry and not pull it through in other elements of the image.
It makes the earrings stand out more even. Especially we have this nice clean white background and then the color here. You know, I'm sure that wasn't an option in the blog post, but if I were selling these earrings, I would put them on a person, right?
Yes,
and show that like just maybe underneath the hair a little bit, but like having your product, showing your product or even your service in use can really increase conversions, but not everybody has that. So you did a great job with this. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right, on to the last pin. Okay, so this pin is all about cruise ships of 2020.
Is it blurry?
It is blurry.
I'm trying to see it better.
Please do not use blurry images. It sends off a signal of just like
you didn't care,
a little bit like unprofessional, and it's easy to avoid. So I don't know where this image is from, but I'm guessing it is a stock image. That's totally okay. You can use stock images. Like, that's great. I would, if you're going to use stock photos, make sure they are free for commercial use. Unsplash.com is a great resource. Rawpixel.com, also a great resource. And the first thing, again, looking at this pin, what stands out? So 2020 is like massive on here, right?
Why?
And then I see the cruise ships and I'm thinking, okay, it's something to do with maybe cruise ships in 2020, but I really don't know. I don't know if I would take the time to read the top of the pin. I think I would probably just scroll, right? It didn't really grab my attention.
Well, like, why do I care? It's like, is it industry news? Like, I'm supposed to care about how they're building cruise ships today?
Yeah.
Confused. I'm confused.
It's a bit confusing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can go to the redesign here.
Oh, yeah.
So this one is like, this was the example that I said before where we're just using one typeface here. So I think this is Open Sans, and just using different weights of that type can really create like a variety and helps sort of break it up as you're reading it. So we're not seeing like one big lump of text. We're kind of like reading it as separate lines. And then at the bottom, actually I pulled this is a stock image. So this is from Unsplash. And I just thought, like, this is a beautiful image. We can use that. If you can find images, this is a personal preference for me, but I love when pins kind of like just overlay on the image. So I just kind of like pulled it was a tall image. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but there needs to be room for font, for type.
So there was white space.
Yes, so there's white space. Yes, there was white space that's blue. Exactly.
Did you add to that space, or was it already that much space on the image?
Did. I added a little bit more. So sometimes, I mean, you can't find images that are tall like that, which is understandable because people don't photograph things expecting to overlay text on top. Some people, right?
You might. Maybe you will now.
I probably will, but I might be an anomaly there. So basically, I just kind of like overlaid the same shade of blue on top of it and made this like nice justified text. And I saw this image and I was like, yeah, that makes me want to go on a cruise. I'm actually going on a cruise next year too. So I was like, what image would make me want to go on this cruise even more?
Yeah. And the text that you chose, it's much more intriguing now. It's much more like interesting and a little mysterious, where the other one was like, I don't care about how they're building cruise ships. Like this one is actually
Yeah.
maybe applicable to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's another great just general tip when designing a pin is, would you click on that pin? Or if you wouldn't, what would entice you to click on that pin? Maybe it is just a quick image change. Maybe your text is just more compelling. The copy is more compelling.
Or Pinteresty.
More Pinteresty and bright. I really like kind of the bright pins because they stand out. And the ones that it's like the font is easy to read, like it's not being obstructed.
Yeah.
Also, like they stand out more because we can quickly glance and read them.
So this one here, it feels like it could have been a much wider image that was cropped. So if you're buying stock images, try to buy the biggest size that you can, because you might be able to crop it and still have it look this fresh and clean and have all that extra room at the top that you didn't really see in that horizontal image, but is clearly here. Wow, what a difference. And in every way.
Yeah. All right. That's all I have for you too. I hope that's helpful, especially with actionable tips. I got this question last time. It's what tools do I use to design? I use Sketch, which I know is not super accessible for most people. It's kind of a product design software. But what I would recommend, especially if you're just starting with creating pins, is to design pins in Canva. And we do have some Canva templates as well. I don't know if are those being shared out, Elisa?
Yeah, so we do have what we call our perfect pin Pinterest toolkit. It's we have a special bit.ly link for just us. It's bit.ly/sem-pinterest-toolkit, all lowercase, if you want to get those. And those were designed specifically with Pinterest creative best practices in mind. And they're actually made in Canva. So you can grab those, add them to your account, and do whatever you want with them. But they're a good place to start. Magdalena, you're muted.
Oh, okay. Now I'm not. I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And just talking about tools and sources, there's a question about sources of stock sources. What were those stock photo sites again? So if you can say it again, where we can find photos.
So it's rawpixel.com and unsplash.com.
Okay, so we will share those links to our attendees. Okay, so let's go to the question, to all the questions that we have. So here we go. Is there a suggestion on how often we should create a new pin for the same content?
So there's not a magic rule for that. If you have a piece of content that was doing really well on Pinterest and now maybe it's kind of slowing down, so you're noticing fewer clicks to your website from a certain pin or a certain piece of content, that may be an indication that it's time to make a new image. So where that can really, where you can really do a good job with that is if you think about seasonality. So even at Tailwind, we've started like thinking about the season and the colors you associate with the season. So we noticed in the summertime, there were a lot of tropical colors that were doing really well. And then when fall came around, we saw like orange and gold was taking off. So even though our content isn't really seasonal, like food bloggers, very, very seasonal. Like there are a lot of niches that are obviously seasonal and you can tie to holidays or certain times of year or seasonal activities. With Tailwind, you would think like, what's the season here? But it still works because if you can think about what is on people's minds, what kinds of styles, themes, and colors are people thinking of, and what are we attracted to right now? Like even now, it's time to get excited about spring. Like I'm looking out my window and I see some purpley pink flowers, even though it's February. So it is like right now is time to move away from winter colors and start thinking spring, because that's what people are thinking. So even if your content has nothing to do with a season, refresh it with maybe some like a spring, like a subtle spring nod, because that's what people are thinking and what they want right now.
Okay, so let's go back for a while to the beginning of your presentation, Alyssa, because we have a questions about that. So question says, is there a suggestion length of pin description? Any tips on how to rank better?
Yeah, so how to rank better would be to include your keywords in your pin. So not keyword stuffing, right? So always writing something that's relevant and helpful. So write for humans first. You often want to start the description with your brand name in the first sentence, because that really helps with brand awareness. And Pinterest is a great place to get that started. But also tell everyone, like, what is this content about? What are they going to get from it? Really encourage them, entice them. Here's what you're going to learn. Here's what you'll be able to do after you read this. You have 50 characters. If any of it shows up in the feed, which I haven't seen for a while, your first 50 characters are going to be it. So concentrate on the earlier part of that. But now your titles are really more important than ever, because that tends to be what shows up in search. And those can be up to 100 characters, but usually only the first 30 shows. And again, use your keywords. Don't repeat what's on the text on image. Don't repeat what's in the description. Use it as a really short, punchy headline and try to get like a real what's in it for me, like how to, or easy ways, simple things, 3 steps, just really concise. Why should I pin this? And again, keywords, keywords, keywords.
Okay, we have a second question somehow related to previous one, which is how to find keywords that rank highest about a theme, a SEO research in Pinterest, how I can gain more visibility.
Yeah, so again, you're going to want to check out the other webinar with Semrush that I did, but Justine alluded to some of that. So I can actually, let's share screen again real quick, because it's more helpful to see. So in my, oh, look, search for acrylic art. Okay, let's do that. So let's say I now have an acrylic art blog, and I'm selling stuff on my on my blog. This is Fantasy World. So I'm like, okay, acrylic pours. How am I going to present this on Pinterest for best effect? Well, Justine already mentioned guided search. So this here is Pinterest telling us, well, here's like Google's auto search complete. So we could go with acrylic pouring art, acrylic pour painting for beginners. All these are keywords that Pinterest is suggesting to us. And then this guided search is like, this is what people are actually searching for in this topic of acrylic pour. There's no significance to the order of them. So if I log in on another account, the order is not going to be the same. So it does not really indicate like, oh, this is the best one on the left, this is the worst one on the right. They're all worth going after. It really is like what fits your content the best. So I'm gonna hit DIY, and you can get even more nichey, right? So you could do like easy acrylic pour DIY. If you're interested in search volume, the way to get a little bit of a workaround for that is in ads. So I just went to ads, create an ad, and we're not going to actually do that, but we are going to use targeting to scroll on down to acrylic pour and see what we get. Acrylic paint pouring. It's telling me there are 2 to 3 million monthly searches.
Wow.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. I probably did half of them last month. But probably the better indicator is over here, your potential audience size. So I have no other filters on whatsoever, no audiences, no nothing. If I just did an ad using acrylic paint pouring, my potential audience size is less than 10,000. So it's like, what this is telling me is there's not a huge audience for it, but that's okay, because how many people do you really need to be searching in order to have success, right? You probably don't need 10,000, but you could add in like painting ideas, painting colors, home painting, and eventually you're going to get a larger audience size. So kind of combining that, the search, like the guided search with that ad tool, And then if you are in the US, the trends tool is really amazing. So if I did, I don't know if they're going to come up with, okay, so acrylic painting, this is showing me like yearly search trend. So I can see it had its biggest moment the end of December. Everybody was on holiday time, I guess, and they had time to do things like acrylic painting. So that's what I mean. Like Pinterest reflects life. It's very cool. So if I'm looking at acrylic painting, all right, what do I want to use? Well, acrylic painting ideas, how does that compare? All right, there's less volume, similar trend line, right? So it's popular around then. So at this moment, I'm going with acrylic painting as a general term, easy acrylic painting ideas, abstract acrylic painting. I'm not seeing, oops, I have to get rid of one of them. Do I get rid of it? No, it's not letting me get rid of one, but you can just compare different terms and see which one has the greatest volume, which one is most popular right now. Because like one example, oh, here's how you get rid of them. I was wondering, like, if I'm a food blogger, keto is huge, right? It was even bigger last year. I had a moment at New Year's resolution time. Do I want to, again, it's life. It's life right here. So do I want to write about keto or do I want to write about Atkins? Well, if I care about Pinterest, keto is it. I wish I'd been writing about it a couple months ago, but yeah, like even these niche terms are bigger than Atkins on Pinterest right now. So there are a lot of tools that you can use to get a feel for what you should be writing about and when, especially when, like seasonally, a lot of these things, like it may be that keto is losing popularity over time, or it may be that your industry is like seasonal ups and downs, and you can kind of tell like what should I be writing about and get some ideas on what your pins could look like.
That's interesting that we also can use so many analysis and get insights on what content we should use. And about this, there's a question: is there a suggested interaction per day or week to perform better in Pinterest?
You know, it depends on the niche. It used to be that like recipe pins did really, really well, like 5 o'clock on a Monday night. But it seems to be much more varied now. So I would try Tailwind. So like I know it sounds like a sales pitch, but trust me, if I had been on long before I joined Tailwind, I'd be saying the same thing. Try the free trial, generate a schedule, and see when they say to pin, because they can look at what you've pinned and who your followers are and when you're most likely to get success. So at least just try that free trial and get your schedule from there.
Yeah. And I think the great thing about it too is like if it doesn't work for you, like it's a free trial, so there's nothing to lose. You have access to all the features. So yeah. If it does, great. If it doesn't, move on.
Okay, I'm sorry. How long is the trial? It
is 100 pins, so you can make it last as long as you want, or you can use it right up.
Got it. Mm-hmm. And talking about the tools, there's a question about that. Is there a way to post automatically from Instagram to Pinterest?
Yes, there is in Tailwind, in fact.
Okay.
Yes.
Here we go. Another reason, guys, to go and try the tool.
That's right.
It's natural. It comes natural.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one. What about hashtags? I try to use them in every pin. Is that useful? And if yes, how many should I write?
Okay, so 1 to 2 is a guideline now. And yes, so I was just able to confirm this with Pinterest that they are still using hashtags because there are some questions going around. They do help in discovery. So I personally only use them if I'm like poking around as a marketer. I don't actually use them as a consumer so much, but they say they help. So I'm going to use 1 or 2. It's not like it takes that long, but the thing is they're not Instagram hashtags. So it's not like Flashback Friday. It's going to be more like Instagram tips or Pinterest tips or tractor repair. You know, it's like more like useful hashtag examples than like stylish or funny
Okay. So looks like it will be our last question, unless there's nothing more. So Macy says, our company does owings and tents rentals. I find that I'm posting about many different topics. For example, I have boards about home improvement and board on other weddings. Any suggestions?
Okay, so she has boards about home improvement and a board on outdoor weddings. So, I mean, if that's what your content is about, I think the question may be here, do I need to have two accounts? I don't, unless you're like completely opposite ends of the spectrum, I don't recommend having two accounts because it's just too much to keep track of. So it's probably fine. I mean, I don't know as far as tips to make them work better together, maybe not so much, but just remember that what's the way people are generally finding you is in search. So they're not typically finding your profile and looking around and saying, why is she writing about home decor and weddings? That doesn't make sense. They're more likely finding you in search. So just make sure that all of your home stuff is optimized for that. So from pin to board description to content on your website, use very similar keywords across that, and then Pinterest will be able to figure out what that pin is. They're not going to penalize you because you write about two different things. That's more about like how your followers act, but there's probably enough overlap that you're okay.
Okay. There's another question about something you probably mentioned before. Can you give tips on adding section to board? Please, do you recommend them?
Oh, okay. So sections were really added as a user feature. So I have a board, a secret board for my hair, and so many pins in there. I know it's like so all about me. There's a section for cuts, colors, styles, products, like sections for everything so that I can go in and find what I want later on. That's super helpful for me, but it's not super helpful for anybody else because they're not going to be looking at my board and browsing. I think that's one of the mistakes that people make, or assumptions that people make that is not necessarily correct, that the people are browsing your account, right? So people will say, well, I have to share other people's images or people will think I'm selfish. No, they're not looking. They're finding you in search almost all the time, or in home feed where that context isn't there. Board sections, they do have some impact on search, but not any more so than having niche board titles. So you could have a board with sections that's called recipes, and then every section is like dinner recipes, easy recipes, healthy recipes, pork recipes, but you're just as well off to have different boards for each of those instead.
Got it. And now there's a question, I think maybe for Justin, but feel free to reply to this one. How do you take a pic from stock to usable? Like crop the size in pixels? What size for the best resolution but good loading speed?
Yeah, so with stock photos, what I always do is just download the original image. What you want to make sure is that whatever size pin you're designing, so Pinterest recommends an aspect ratio of 2:3, which just means that the width is 2/3 of the height. I think now in 2020, they're recommending 1,000 pixels by 1,500 pixels. Elisa's nodding, so it must be right. So when you're grabbing an image, make sure that it is that size or greater. It depends on, are you planning on making the image larger on your canvas wherever you're designing, or are you making it smaller? So it's going to depend on that. I think there's a really good rule of just, if the image looks like, if it doesn't look blurry, you're fine, right? So there's like just a visual test that you can make yourself. As far as like load time and speed, you don't have to worry about that on Pinterest. I'm pretty sure Pinterest does that for you, right, Elisa? When you upload it, it's just optimizes the size or reduces the size.
Yeah, I believe so. And yeah, don't forget, you can go up to 1 to 2.1 in ratio if you want to go a little taller.
Right. Yeah. So as far as load time goes, don't worry about load time, just worry about pixels. So make sure it's at least 1,000 pixels wide if you are designing, and I would recommend a width of at least 1,000 pixels. no less than 600.
Got it. Okay, so now it's really very last question because I saying that since like 3 questions. Do you know when we will be able to run paid ads in Brazil?
Oh, I don't. I'm kind of surprised that you can't already. They've been opening up to more and more. I'm wondering if they've checked recently. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Brazil. It's available in Europe. I don't know. There have been a lot of new ones lately, but I don't remember specifically seeing Brazil. I'm sorry.
So what I can to do is to recommend to our attendees to follow you, because probably maybe sometime it will be a news on your LinkedIn or Twitter, because you said, right, that it's possible to ask your question on
Oh yeah,
your
please.
profiles. So
Yeah, Twitter is probably the easiest one. Elisa and Meredith.
because we have a lot of questions, our webinar is a little bit longer because we have a lot of questions. So guys, please remember that Alyssa and Justine are available, on Twitter and LinkedIn. So I think it's okay if I'm saying that. Feel free to ask questions.
Not Twitter for me, but LinkedIn.
Okay. So LinkedIn works too. Okay, so I think it was really juicy webinar.
We talked about tractors and hair and yeah.
Every time there's tractor, I'm happy.
That was a great webinar with the tractor.
That's right.
Okay, but it was great because of you and all the information you have shared. And the world knows now about my blog about tractors. Okay, guys, actually it was just to say that I have a blog, such a blog, and the Pinterest was just the cover for that.
It was all about the tractor blog, really.
Okay, and let's make it a summary of this webinar. Thank you very much. It was a huge pleasure for me to do it with you. And again, if anyone has more questions, just please go to LinkedIn and Twitter. And thank you for being with us today. Have a great day or evening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.